And indeed, we are preparing for major elections next year. We're so far off, but the campaign season is in full swing, thanks to the internal primaries of both the NDC and the MPP. And so the key individuals, protagonists are campaigning, and with campaigns come promises. One age-old challenge has reared its head, which is the partisan race to pack the security services. And it's inspired by something that John Mahama said on the campaign trail. Something that many will say we know exists. He just owned it and articulated it. And so let's review it, because going into the elections, it will become an important subject to look at when we look at our security services. So what did John Mahama say, to be very specific? This is his direct quote. He says, our people, our branch executives. He was talking to branch executives, party folks in the northern region. He says, your children, just stand by. If you're distributing any jobs, if you're recruiting people into the police, the army, the prison service, the fire service, and immigration, we will recruit our own, all our young people to get to go and work, right? And then he mentions the many services as well, as you see in there, the police, etc. Now, many have looked at that and said, well, that is a problem going into an elections when a key protagonist talks about what he plans to do with party executives and their relatives getting into the service. And it was clear that we will ensure that you also get recruited right into the services, the police, etc. Well, did he state the obvious? Because as we've known, this is an issue that both parties at one point or the other have had to complain about. Because if you look back to the Harun Idrisu's tenure when he was the minority leader in parliament, he complained about it. And he made the point about how the MPP was recruiting party supporters into the security services. And he was clear that if the NDC took power, they will make sure that they reverse these unlawful recruitment into the service, because people were being recruited in the service on partisan lines. Now, the reason why this is important, and why we are opening it up, is the NPP and that's the Yawaso West Wuogon by-election commission of inquiry established, seem to have set a setting precedent, because that particular commission report highlighted what has become a very entrenched problem, where the security services had been washed with party folks. Some of them were not actually qualified to do the job, right? So this is what the Yawaso West Wuogon by-election commission of inquiry found, and that party faithfuls are often resettled through the national security establishment. This is a finding of fact by the commission of inquiry set up by the president himself. So there's no doubt that this happens in the security services, right? But in this case, it was talking about a problem that had been created by the MPP, which reared its head and became a subject of some controversy, but violence as well, in the Yawaso West Wuogon by-election that we saw. For which reason the Commission of Inquiry had to talk about it. We saw the case of Double, that's the nickname of an officer in the national security apparatus, who himself came before the Commission of Inquiry and said he was a party executive in the constituency and recruited into the service, and was one of those key actors in the violence that we saw that day in that by-election. So that is an ample evidence, an illustration of what could happen when you pack the security services with people who are partisan, not necessarily because they are qualified. And a bit more of the things that the Commission of Inquiry talked about there, that the mere presence of these party loyalists and activists, he says, encourages opposition parties to counter their activities. And this is very important, because it brings into sharp focus the John Mahama pronouncement in the northern region. The Yawaso West Wuogon by-election commission was warning us that if the incumbent then, the governing New Patriotic Party, didn't do anything about it, it will encourage opposition parties to counter their activities. What would that mean? What that means is opposition parties will feel, or if the incumbent party is doing it, and is packing the security services with NPP folks, then why should we sit by and watch this unfold? Why shouldn't we do the same? So the key question then becomes, do you blame John Mahama when he campaigns now and says, well, when I come, the executives and your children will make sure when we are recruited into the police, etc., you get recruited as well. You're not surprised because the Commission of Inquiry warned us that will happen, which is exactly what he's saying. We'll get into talk about that very shortly. And then he makes the point that national security should be a non-partisan, and which is very important, which why we are talking about it. It should be non-partisan, founded on an object loyalty to the state. It should be loyalty to the state and not to the party. But we've seen historically that both parties have done this over time, and many have said, well, it came to a head when Ayawaso was gone, and the commission called it out, quite rightly, that your allegiance should be to the state and not to the party. That the party's appointment into the National Security Services also violates the Security and Intelligence Agencies Act. And it's not me saying it, it is the Commission of Inquiry saying it. And that obviously then would place this particular law in sharp contrast with what John Mahama was saying on the campaign platform. And the Commission of Inquiry, if we take what they've said to heart, then it means that if indeed John Mahama goes ahead and ensures the recruitment of these party executives into the party, according to the Commission, it is a violation of the Security and Intelligence Agencies Act, and also partner appointments affect the confidence in the service, because you've seen that tension that always exists. And then it has also fed into the Security Threat Index. Why? Because of the perceived trust of citizens in the domestic security has now become an issue. People perceive the security services to be partisan or have partisan elements in there. Then, therefore, it also translates into lack of trust for men in uniform. And that's why we've seen, the low performances that we've seen in terms of the Security Threat Index. The trust that people have in the services have been falling since 2020, and so you begin to see that play out quite obviously here. In 2022, we have 4.3. That the closer you get to 10, reviews a high threat, right? If you're close to 0, it tells you a story of reviews a low threat. So yeah, so this isn't. We're just right there on the borderlines of this, which we could be doing better if we were approaching this a bit more, with a bit more care. Now, if you look at the national security strategy also that we developed to guide our operations going forward as a country, it makes the point that develop a professional, party, political, neutral security service. So this is this country's national security strategy that makes the point emphatically that going forward, this strategy will guide us, where we will not have individuals in the security services who are partisan, but they will be party politically neutral, right? This is a strategy going forward. So any statement that says we'll recruit, it's in violation of that as well. And both sides, we know, do that. But of course, that's not the only thing John Mahama has been saying on the platform. A very important point is made, which has started a lot of controversy. And we've seen that the Council of State has also become part of the conversation, because the MPP says, well, this is something we want to do already. I'm talking about the promise to amend the law so that dual citizens can also hold public office in Ghana. And he made that promise on a campaign platform. He says he doesn't understand that. He will clarify that law. The MPP says, well, we are doing that already. He may not have the chance because we'll implement it. So we'll look at all that when we sit to have a conversation. My guest will join me after this. And thank you for staying with us here on PM Express. As you may know, the campaign season is in full swing. The various candidates are out there slagging it out. This is within the NDC. The MPP's own race is also heating up quite interestingly, and many promises have been made, etc., etc. We'll connect with many of our reporters now covering the NDC race across the country very shortly. Dr. Kwabena Dufo has been in the Ashanti region, and John Mahama has been, I believe, was in the northern region and has moved now to the Upper West region. And Joyce Mutari has been traveling with him. As you know, she speaks for that campaign, and she joins us on the line right now. Joyce, you were with the former president in the northern region. He's moved to the Upper West region today, and I know from what my reporters have been telling us, he's been talking about the economy and a host of other issues that are important for him. How has he been received in the Upper West region?
Well, thank you very much, Evans. A very good evening to you and good evening to everybody else. You know how it is when you're traveling around the country. Getting the good network is never easy. I've actually had to move like 3 different spots to be able to get a secure line. Well, I believe you do know that President Mahama moved from Northern region to the Upper West region. And the Upper West region, like the Volta region, is one of the key battlefronts of the National Democratic Congress. Indeed, we started off in Tumu, and you do know that usually whenever President Mahama approaches this region, you'll meet him at a place called Bamaho. It was no different last night at about 10 p.m. We had all sorts of people from the rank and file of our party, supporters, volunteers, activists, name it, and former appointees, members of the Council of Elders, and many people who actually queued out there on the streets of Upper West Region, capital Wa, to at least accompany him to his hotel. This morning we set off pretty early. It took us 2 hours from the capital of Wa to get all the way to Tumu. We've traveled about 6-7 constituencies, and we've just arrived in the Wa Central constituency. You can hear President Mahama in the background. He's still speaking to the delegates in the auditorium of the Wa Technical School. So we've had a fantastic day, great day, so much energy. I'm actually overwhelmed, and I believe that the delegates come Saturday, the 13th of May, will do for us all that we've been asking. To endorse and return John Dramani Mahama to lead the NDC into the 2024 election.
And in all these places that he's been talking a lot about the key national issues. I wonder, how is he segregating the national issues? Well, this is an internal party elections. Is he addressing the local internal delegates' relevant issues at that level, or he is pitching himself already as the presumptive nominee, as some have called him?
Well, thank you very much. We all do know that under the circumstances, President Mahama is in full position, if I can copy the headline of the graphic newspaper of a few days ago, to lead the NDC. So for now, I believe, like everybody else believes, that he's actually a presumptive flag bearer. Indeed, President Mahama has had 2 messages right from the Volta region up to the Upper West region. He's been speaking to matters to do with internal party issues, party welfare, matters to do with delegates, rewards for constituencies that bring in the largest number of votes. Apart from that, he's been speaking to training for our branch and regional executives at the party schools. He's also been speaking to scholarships for wards of party members. He's been speaking to jobs and opportunities for members of the National Democratic Congress. He has actually been working to energize the base of the party. But you also know that in all of this, one of the main things that actually faces all of us as a people, and none of us can deny it, there's no game saying that there are very difficult challenges to do with the economy, to do with unemployment, to do with even basic amenities such as the national health insurance, and it's the inability to sustain people's health needs. He's been speaking about roads. Above all, he's been speaking about many projects that have literally been abandoned ever since the NDC left office. So he's speaking largely to crowds that are both Ghanaian and members of the National Democratic Congress. I'm sure you and I do know that many of the messages have had a certain national connotation. They've also had a certain local NDC-specific connotation. But even when it comes to jobs, when it comes to health, when it comes to amenities, when it comes to road, when it comes to infrastructure, when it comes to opportunities. You know that these are matters that challenge each and every Ghanaian, irrespective of political party affiliation. So certainly we're speaking to the minds of many of us, as well as party members.
And like every other campaign, a few things that will be said on a campaign platform either will generate controversy, will generate applause, or will generate a bit of scrutiny. One that has generated some bit of scrutiny, in fact, two things in particular, but let me start with the first one. He was speaking to the party delegates there in the northern region and makes the point about recruitment into the police and other security services, and that if he comes, he'll make sure they get recruited. That has been criticized by some, but some also say, well, listen, this is just stating the obvious. Since he said that, with the conversations that has triggered, looking back on what he said, does he really still stand by the comment that he made, that when he comes and when their recruitment to ensure that their party executives and their children are all recruited into the services?
Oh, Evans, you've asked me this question so many times. I'm sure I've tried very hard to literally answer you in the best possible way that I can think of. Look, who has suffered the most over the last 8 years? Who are those who have not been able to get a job, to find access? Who are the ones who have most been trodden upon in the last few years? One of the criticisms President Mahama suffered, if you recall, in his time in office, in fact, both President Mahama and late President John Evans Mensah, the party hierarchy accused them of playing the role of father for all. You remember that phrase? They were accused of allowing every Tom, Dick and Harry, every Ghanaian, every well-meaning citizen to enjoy the fruits of the NDC's labor, even at the time when the NDC was in office. Most of our supporters are actually asking and demanding that whatever was good for the NPP and its supporters, same should be done for members of the National Democratic Congress. Look, let's be very, very realistic here. We should not in any way raise the bar for the National Democratic Congress. I'm sure that what we need to do is to put the NPP to the litmus test on all the key facets that they pledged to do upon assumption of office. Evans, you live here with me, on corruption, on media freedoms or press freedom, on employment for persons of, without any discrimination, in terms of access, in terms of building a better economy, in terms of managing our health institutions, in terms of providing roads, water, electricity, all the things that you and I desire. The worst part is that same economy that is promised to better money, we have literally run aground. The country is currently bankrupt. So please, once we are in here, we know what we've gone through. We know what we have suffered. Look, I had a very, very, very interesting encounter of a young boy who gained admission into one of the uniform agencies. He was denied access largely because he was unable to prove the fact that he was a member of the New Patriotic Party. So these are some of the challenges that we have. And so in all the conversations that we are having, let's remember first and foremost, it is the abysmal failure of the Akufo-Addo-Bawumia administration that has led us to some of these conversations. Why did President Mahama of Samuel be accused of playing a father for all? Why did they take political opponents to the court? Why did they allow some of them even to go free after just basic and mere investigations? For all the allegations that were made against President Mahama and his government, tell me which one of them we do know that has been proven. This morning, President Mahama spoke about the matter to do with corruption. Even the worst performance of the NDC is now actually the best for the New Patriotic Party. Evans, I want us to speak largely to our conscience, to speak to the good people of Ghana, to appeal to our citizens. On the last few occasions, we were told that we were never going to go back to the IMF. We were told that the e-levy will resolve all our challenges. We were told that we were going to come and build back an economy better than what John Mahama, Professor Mills, and Emisasa all together were unable to do. But you also do know that in all that period, 8 years later, none of those things have materialized.
I mean,
I think
Joy, stay with me. We'll expand the conversation to the other key economic issues, but you've made the substantive argument around why he made the point about the recruitment of police service. Richard Ehagba is with the the governing New Patriotic Party. He's the communications director of the party and joins us right now via Zoom. Richard, you heard the Joyce Bauer there. It's been a few days. I asked her if John Mahama stands by this. Clearly, John Mahama stands by this, and she makes the point very clearly that if it's good for you, it must be good for the NDC as well. Okay, we lost him there on the line, Richard Ehagba. We'll be joined by Professor Kwesi Ening, who will join us pretty shortly. I want to take a break. When I return, we would hear a bit more about this particular issue, but also get into the campaign trail generally from the NDC's point of view. Joyce will stay with me, and we'll go to Kumasi as well. Rafiq will join me, who's also been with the John Mahama's campaign today as we build up towards Saturday. Stay with me. Having a conversation in the midst of the political season that is beginning to shape up into something really interesting, talking about all the key controversial issues popping up. And the interesting thing about this is way before the election year itself, but because both parties this year are embroiled in internal elections to elect flag bearers and parliamentary aspirants. So we're seeing all this campaigning very aggressively playing out with its fair share of controversies. As we've been discussing, one of the key things that has emerged is John Mahama's pronouncements he's made on the campaign trail, particularly the issues surrounding the security services and his planned recruitment in there of party executives. As I was saying earlier, we're joined by the NPP's Director of Communications, Richard Ehagba, who is on Zoom right now. Richard, so you heard before we went for that quick break from Joyce Bauer Mukhtari, whose point is very simple. And as I illustrated with the Ayawaso West Wuogon By-Elections Commission of Inquiry's report that found extensive recruitment into the security services by the MPP administration with some of the elements in there. She says, if it's good for the MPP, why not for the NDC? Your reaction?
Well, Evan, thank you very much. I am no longer on Zoom because my Zoom is
Party needs a new.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm actually speaking to you on the phone now.
Okay.
Well, thank you. I think you're positioning the question as though probably asking if the former president has stated the obvious. I don't think he stated the obvious at all. If anything at all, if there's anything obvious about what he said, then it is his violation of an obvious law that actually preclude any party or any government from proceeding along the lines of building a partisan security force. And so that's really what I find very dangerous about what the former president said. Now, my sister Joyce's defense, as she did perhaps sometime yesterday as well, was to indicate that, oh, well, she knows about that happening. And she gave you an example of an individual who said he wasn't permitted to be part of the recruitment process because he couldn't justify his membership of the New Patriotic Party. I find that very preposterous. How do you do that? Where is the evidence? And I think that if something like this has happened, I think she should take it up. Now, the positioning and the posturing of saying that, oh, something untoward has happened or something wrong has happened, and as a result of it, we are going to break the law. For me, I find that very laughable, and in building a democratic institution, we shouldn't be having this conversation. I think that the former president misspoke. If I were speaking for him, that would be my position, that he misspoke, and that is not what he intended. Try to explain and put a better spin on this, but to entrench your position to say that, yes, we say that and we mean it, I find it very disturbing. But you see, I'm not surprised Because if you monitor the campaign up until now, this is how the former president is speaking. In Kofodia, I think Eastern region, I'm not sure if it was in Kofodia in particular, on 15th of April, there was a similar utterance that was made to party executives, saying that when they win power, the party will ensure that party executives are considered or are given consideration during recruitment exercises. He said a similar thing in respect of galamseyers, saying that there are galamseyers in jail who are NDC, and that when they win power, they will free them so they can go about their jobs. He said the same thing about school feeding women, that NDC women must also cook for the school feeding program as though they've been intentionally excluded from the process. I say that if all of these things existed, which I know doesn't, but if there are evidence for those things have existed up until now, then there should be an effort to fix them. The commitment must be pointing them out and trying to fix them and correct them in making a proposition for a forward leadership. I think that the best posturing of the NDC and therefore the former president should be that these are things we observe to be wrong and we think that we can fix it, right? But it is not the case, in the case of police recruitment and the rest, that there is an intentional effort to recruit party people in a manner the president is suggesting in his speech. Because, Evans, you know that for a while now, this police recruitment is done online. Right? A situation where there is an impersonal application process. To what extent would one be able to manipulate this process? Now, I've heard instances, I think I made this point to you the last time I spoke to you. I've heard instances where MPs will lobby, and politics lobby is acceptable. So if a parliamentarian lobbies and finds a way to get somebody into the service, it is not equal to a grand political setup to say that we want to recruit our people in the manner the former president is promising. So I think that, first of all, to proceed with this conversation, if at all there are any irregularities or any observed anomaly with the recruitment process, first of all, we must roundly condemn the former president's utterance in respect of this matter, because it's dangerous, because it violates
keeping them honest.
Law.
Richard, keeping them honest. Whilst you are in a hurry to roundly condemn him, you must admit first that the MPP started this particular race to the bottom by parking the security services. And don't take my word for it. Let me read to you what the Ayawaso West Wagon, set up by your own the president, who is the leader of your party, what the commission said. And this is just about applying the rules fairly across the board. Since you say condemn roundly, the commission said they found evidence that party faithfuls, that is your government, had resettled these party faithful through the national security establishment. And this is the part where the Jomama bit comes in. It says their mere presence encourages opposition parties to counter their activities. So this is the commission that the president set up, warning all of us that because of the evidence they found that you already put in a lot of party people in the party, in the security services, it encourages opposition parties to counter. This is John Mahama. This is the commission warning you that this will happen. This is what is happening now with John Mahama. So would you first admit that you had created this problem and that you should also be equally condemned for doing so? Would you admit that?
Well, thank you, Evans. I think I'm not saying anything to say to condemn him just because he said what he said. But I'm saying that what he said violates an obvious law, right? What he says violates Act 526, right? And so on the basis of that, he needs to be condemned, right? Now, if you are saying that there is a suspicion, because I don't see the evidence. Nobody has accused the evidence.
This isn't suspicion. I mean, the Commission of Inquiry's report is the report, and they found evidence of this. So this is not suspicion.
Okay, so let me tell you what evidence you are looking for. The evidence you are looking for is in relation to what the former president says and what the law frowns on, is to have a grand party setup. Now, you cannot convince me that the MPP is in power and therefore anybody, or there isn't anybody, the possibility of anybody becoming part of a police service or military, that is not an NPP person. You cannot convince me about that. Because I'm from the Volta region, and when NDC was in power, I know a host of people who became part of the security services by virtue of the fact that they're NDC. But the caveat here, Evans, is the idea that the person who, by virtue of their membership becoming a member of any of the security forces, has the requisite qualification to do so. Right?
Yeah, but
because that, Evans, you cannot convince me that there is you don't have a party. You might not profess your party openly as I do, but you vote for a political party. I vote for a political party. That should not be a disqualifier for anybody to join the service. But what we are talking about is a grand setup, which is what the former president is proposing. Yeah. That when he becomes president, he will set up, he said that when he becomes president, he will set up a system to recruit NDC people. And we're saying that is against the law.
Yes, but Richard, I'm keeping them honest again. Again, going back to that document by the commission, at least there was one case, and the man himself, his own testimony before the commission, and I was before the commission myself as a witness. So I followed this very closely. A man called Double, he himself, his own testimony, and he was a protagonist in the whole confusion, the violence, testified that he got in there because he was a constituency executive of your party. He had no qualification to be in there, but because of his affiliation to your party, he got in there. It was on the basis of that and others that the commission makes the recommendation. So again, once you make the point that somebody should be condemned for making this, you've already set up the mechanism that has produced people like that, leading to conflicts such as we saw at Ayawa. So are you willing to accept that your party itself should be condemned also, at least in the last 6-7 years, have created a mess that needs to be cleaned up?
Well, so Evans, I'm trying to have a conversation with you that looks forward. And I'm also trying to distinguish for you a setup, a party policy position, a design by a political party to say that our approach is to set up to recruit our people.
Well, I have no quarrels.
As opposed to an appearance of an individual associated. I gave you evidence earlier about what I know about NDC being in power and people affiliated with the NDC getting into the security service. It is not a phenomenon that doesn't happen. It happens. It happens. And in fact, my sister Joyce cannot deny this, because I know people who gotten into it because they're NDC. Now, the danger, which I think that we need to avert our minds to, which is the essence of this conversation, is that the design and the forward announcement of that if I become president, then this is what I'm going to do. Now, it questions leadership. Okay? It proposes to me that if this person becomes president,
but Richard, Richard, I'll bring Joyce
thrown
in.
out. And Richard, then he will implement what is it that he canvassed on, and people voted for him. Now, you cannot hold it against him then when he does that.
Richard, I'll bring Joyce in on very shortly to answer a more substantive question. But where is your moral authority for calling out John Mahama when the evidence says you've done same? Where's that moral authority?
You see, when you were talking about what appeared to be an instance, you cited Double.
Yeah.
But I can cite to you a grand design.
Yeah, but you are
okay,
you are
so I'm just saying
avoiding the point.
You
don't want to address your own contribution to the problem. You are quick to point the finger. I'm coming back to you on this.
Right.
Where is the moral authority? Are you willing to accept that this problem, your party, have also been very instrumental in creating the mess that we currently have?
I have considered a position to you to suggest that It doesn't surprise me, or it won't surprise me, for anybody to make that claim that they are a member of the security forces, a member of any service, or have any opportunity in government services or anywhere else because they associate with one political party or the other. I've considered that to you, right? So if you refer that to being double because it's a political party or constituency executive, so be it. But what I am trying for us to avert our minds to going forward is that a proposition by a political party, a presumptive candidate of a political party, telling us beforehand that if I ever become president of this country, this is what I am going to do. And I've given you a series of instances where he has proposed things that are dangerous. Now, in this particular case, if you suspect or if you accuse the NPP of doing that, an individual, you have to prove that, right? In the case of the NPP, you have to prove that. But now you have evidence of one's own words saying this is what I'm going to do, which stand in sharp contrast to the law, saying that you cannot carry on with a security service on a partisan line. So I'm saying that in today's conversation going forward, we need to roundly condemn this. Now, if you do that, and you have evidence to suggest that the NPP designed and implemented a similar thing, then we can have conversation about that. But the idea that an individual says that I'm a constituency executive, because of proximity to power, he benefited to canvas, is not the same as a grand design to make the national security services or the security forces of our country partisan. They are not the same thing.
So stay with me. Let me bring in Joyce. Joyce, let's put this bluntly. The comments by John Mahama were wrong, were they not? Considering that he was a former commander-in-chief of the security services, and as I illustrated, his own party folks in Parliament, Harun Edrisu, had condemned recruitment of partisans into the security services. Call it what it is. It was wrong. In fact, the Commission of Inquiry, I keep quoting, says what he intends to do if he becomes president, it is not only wrong, it is illegal because it violates Section 15 of the Securities and Intelligence Agencies Act. He can't do that.
Eva, let me put it very simply. I do recall Mr. Ikeda defending the Brian Achampong remarks, defending those utterances. He appears to be one of those individuals who defend anything that is regurgitated by members of the New Patriotic Party. It is only when it comes to some other political party that he seeks to deliver moral lessons and create this very noxious impression that some people are probably more entitled than others. Let me repeat for the avoidance of doubt, and you do know that I'm a lawyer and a good one at that. President Mahama said very simply, I know many of your children and siblings were denied recruitment despite being qualified. That actually underlines the example I gave you. Our next government will ensure that you do not get disenfranchised. It will ensure that our people are not denied in our nationalistic recruitment process. Evans, let me put this very, very carefully, without any fear of equivocation from anybody, that I do not take instructions or lessons from Richard. Having listened to him over the last few years, the utter arrogance with which he posits some of the things that he says. Look, President Akufo-Addo was actually one of those individuals none of us imagined would sink so low. Not one of us actually expected that he would come into office, recruit the Delta forces into uniforms, give them police uniforms, make them so entitled as to jump a high court in session, as to attack members of parliament in a by-election. In any case, where was he when President Akufo-Addo spoke about Ekiwa, Kakra, and all those things and threats that he made, all because he wanted to come into office?
But Joyce, in all the cases, you cite,
on the matter of Galamsey, we now know from the Professor Frimpong Boateng report that people like Mr. Richard Ayagba are all engaged in this endeavor.
No, but Joyce, in all the cases you cite, the NDC roundly condemned the party. So why do you want to repeat the wrong that you condemn?
Let me say one thing. I've told you before, what is good for the goose is good for the gander. If we have NDC people who are qualified, don't forget, the NDC has no SAG. The NDC has no Delta forces. At least there's no record of any such persons, be they regular or irregular, persons of any form of militia SAG, unlike the Delta forces of the New Patriotic Party. Look, we ought to be very honest. We need to take all our gloves off. Let's speak to power what is truthful. Our security is at an all-time low. Morale is low. Promotions are terrible. Done along partisan lines. Please.
Yeah. But that is what you are proposing. That is what you are proposing to continue. You are proposing to continue that trend.
If we propose to continue that trend, you are right here. You can put us to scrutiny. You can demand answers. But I can tell you one thing. The NDC does not train SAG. We don't have any Delta forces. Persons who are going to be roped into a security agency. You've never heard that. There's no such public record anywhere in the world. But this is evidence in a report by an eminent jurist, no meaner person than a former commissioner of the Commission on Human Rights and Administrative Justice.
Yeah,
You've read the U.S. Human Rights Report. You've read the Afrobarometer report.
Yes.
You've heard the Ghana Integrity.
I have read all those reports.
Let's put the blame
Joyce,
squarely at the hands of the Jubilee House.
Because
and condemn what they're doing so far.
But Joyce, because you quoted that document and you celebrate the eminence of the people who authored it, that same document say what John Mahama said is a violation of law.
That document had nothing to do with John Mahama. At the time, John Mahama said absolutely nothing.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. That's true, except that your intention...
Vice President and all those who speak for the MPP in the manner in which Mr. Ayagba does. Look, Evans, let me tell you one thing. John Mahama has been there before. And you were here in that. Of all the ills you could ascribe to President Mahama, none of them is on the position of the Delta forces. None of them is on what happened in Yawasu West London. None of them is on what happened with Azubu and all those people. Even Brian Echampo has been promoted and given some vain glory for his actions in the Yawasu West Wagon incident. Look, I think you can help us by putting to strict proof the New Patriotic Party, led by President Akufo-Addo and Vice President Bawumia. They've been in office for 8 years. Ask them what did they do after they issued the government white paper. More than anything, put them to the test. Demand strict proof from them first and foremost. And then you can come and ask President Mahama. And look, we have suffered the ugliest in terms of, go to the ministry. Everybody with any appointment letters from the NDC was dismissed without any recourse to anything. Go around the offices, check in all the institutions, check in all the agencies, departments. Go around you, check with promotions. Look, we speak to matters that are borne out by research. We don't speak out of turn.
Okay.
Mr. Mahama has lived it. He has understood it. He knows what he speaks of. Let's condemn what is wrong, but let's uphold what is truth. And I believe that on this occasion, we speak to what is true.
Yeah,
sometimes Mr. Mahama is a bit too honest. And I think that is a challenge.
Okay, well,
most
Joyce,
of the people in office are acting with enormous disingenuity. And you must always ask them and demand that he do the right thing.
Yeah, Joyce, I'm grateful. I'm grateful that you joined.
Doing something partisan or not.
Yeah,
you have not asked President Akufo-Addo.
I'm grateful that you joined me, Joyce. I'm grateful that you joined me, Richard. We're expected to be joined by Professor Kwesi Enenor. Unfortunately, he's stuck somewhere out of the country, and his connection hasn't been stable at all, and that's why we've not managed to bring him to you. And our reporters across the country also, obviously, still the campaigning is in full swing. Tomorrow we have a special show, the last before the primaries. We'll bring you that as well. Enjoy the rest of your evening.